Okay, you might want to have some paper towels handy, because I'm going to be lifting out the clouds. Okay, I'm going to be using my big wash brush to do the, get the background wet for the sky. It's kind of nice being at home. If I need something, I don't have to sit there and think, well, I'll have to bring it next time. Now, I was going to mask out some of this stuff, and I want to get my masking out, and all I have is a little lump of rubber, so I'm going to have to be lifting things out. Okay, I'm just going to start with some ultramarine blue and a little touch of burnt sienna, and just kind of come across the sky. Oops, that's too much burnt sienna. Before it didn't want to pick up anything. I'm putting the burnt sienna in there, mostly to kind of gray that color. Just a little bit. I don't want a brilliant blue sky. I really got that too wet. I'm going to take some water off. And if the ultramarine blue isn't, if you want a different color, I'm not real happy with this as far as the color is concerned. You can use a different color like cobalt. Cobalt would probably be a better color. But I'm just going to work with what I got now. Each color is a little bit different in the mediums. I guess it's the way they make it. Now I'm going to turn this upside down because I want to add a little color right along the horizon. I'm going to take a little bit of alizarin crimson and just come right here along the bottom edge and just let it drift up. Rinsing my brush. Take a little bit off of my cliff there. And I'm just going to kind of guide it on up with a damp brush. You don't want a real wet brush at this point. And I know it's not in the picture. I'm just doing it for artistic reasons. It gives it just a little more life. I got to remember to check my monitor. Okay, let's turn it back. Now I'm going to come back over it with a little bit of, I've got cobalt blue on my palette, and I'm just going to add a little bit to the top here just to make it a little bit of a bluer color. I don't know if I've got other colors mixed in with my ultramarine or what. but it's not the color that I want it. And when watercolor's at this stage, you can just come back in and kind of play with the color. And when it's dry too, I could come back in and add layers of something if I really wanted to. Now I always start at the top with the sky, so that the most color is going to be at the top, and then I rinse my brush and just with a damp brush, just work it down, give kind of a graded look. Oh, it looks better on my monitor than it does in person. I looked up, oh, that doesn't look that bad. Okay. Alrighty, so now I'm going to get a clean paper towel. And you just want to, just make it kind of rough and then just lift out. We've done this before. And some of that paint will come back in, and that's okay. I will be doing more detail into this after it dries, adding some darks and try to lift out a little more highlights. Mostly I'm worried about the like the tops of the clouds that may be up in the sun and picking up a little bit of light. And I'm moving around my paper towel so that I'm not going to put color back into. And if you just tap lightly, you won't pick up as much paint. If you press really hard, you'll pick up more paint. It'll soak into the paper towel a little better. And once this dries, you're going to see it differently. You can also lift with a brush. This is just my 3/4 inch brush. There may be some little high streaky clouds up above, or some, I'm just picking up a little bit of water and letting it kind of push the paint away. Because there are those puffy, weird clouds you see after it rains. This is all the cloud techniques in one. Sometimes you have to kind of stop yourself because it does start to feel good. And you can do too much, which is what I'm doing right now. Catch that. Okay. I've got a little bit of my ultramarine blue, and I'm going to add just a little touch of burnt sienna into it to make it kind of I want a warm gray color, but I do want it kind of grayish, maybe even a tiny touch of orange. There's no such thing as a tiny touch of orange. Hold on. Okay, so I've got my ultramarine blue, some burnt sienna, and as little a touch of orange as I could to make this kind of gray color. And I just want to put it back here. The reason I'm doing this while it's still wet is so that maybe the edges will fuzz out just a little bit. When you're trying to create atmosphere in a painting, you need to be aware of the how things look in the distance. They're in the distance, they're going to be softer and grayer. There will be less detail. You know, so you don't want a really thick paint back here. You want a very watery paint so that it's, when it dries, it's very light. You know, it's just a little bit darker than the sky. I'm just checking my... I've got my reference photo right above me so that I can see what's going on. I kind of want these clouds to dry a little bit before I continue on. So this is my 3/4 inch angle brush, and I'm just going to come in and wet the whole thing. I'm going to go over rocks and everything. The rocks are darker than the water is, so you know, just having some color underneath there is not going to hurt it any. Bring it all the way up. Now this is where, if you don't have ultramarine blue, do not use phthalo blue, because phthalo blue is a staining color, and you're going to need to have a color that you can lift out, to lift out the foam and highlights on the water. So I'm just going over this, make sure I've got it all covered. But that's the only caveat here, is that you want to make sure that you've got a color that you can lift. And ultramarine blue is a good color to lift. Now I'm going to start at the back with the ultramarine blue. Oops. After I go along the horizon line there. And I'm going to add just a little touch of the alizarin crimson. That'll kind of give it a purpley color in the background. Water, if you really start looking at the water, you're going to see that it's not just blue. There's a lot of different colors in it. So, you know, it's got blue in it, but it also has some greens in it, which I'll put in here in a minute. So now I'm going to pick up some Hooker's Green, and I have Hooker's Green Deep, along with my ultramarine blue, making it just a little bit stronger color. That means I'm using less water in it. I'm just going to come up and add that. Now this is all underpainting, and this underpainting, in watercolor, the underpainting becomes highlights or lighter tones, whereas in anything else, the underpainting is usually the mid-tones to darker tones. I'm just looking, and I'm pulling it across. The fact that it's wet, and I'm working on an angle. You know, I've got I don't know if you can see it. I've got these two blocks here, and I've got it set up on the top block, so that's about a 4-inch rise, and that you know, let's gravity help me. Okay, so up near the where it's getting thinner and breaking, I'm going to add just a touch of burnt sienna to that. Now sometimes I when I'm over on my palette, I'm working the color into my brush so I don't have a big glob of color in there. But now I'm just work the burnt sienna in with the blue and the little bit of green that's still on there. Drag it back down. Let the watercolor do a lot of your work by letting, mixing and letting the watercolor come in and blend and things. You get a much more natural look to what you're doing. If you're trying to fight the watercolor and force it to do your bidding, it'll just laugh at you. And you know what I'm talking about. It just does its own thing and turns to mud. But if you're working with it, this is wet dirt over here, so it'll be a little browner. If you work with it and just let it do its thing and don't try to fight it so much. You're going to be much happier with it because it will be happy. Now I've rinsed my brush and I'm just drying it off, and I'm going to come back in and just start the lifting out process of this foam. Let me switch to a different brush. While it's still wet, it'll flow back into there a little bit, but that's okay. It gives it softer edges, and by lifting out, a little bit of the local color stays. So now what I want to do is I want to work a little bit more on the clouds. The sky's pretty dry right now, and I can come back in here. Now I've got my photo right here, and what I want to do is I want to put these darker colors in. Maybe not the darkest just yet, but I do want to start putting in some of these darker colors and giving my clouds a little more shape. And I'm going to be kind of putting the color down and then softening edges as I go. So leave it there where I can see it. And I may come back in and do a little bit more behind the clouds too. It's just going to depend. But I've got that gray mixture. Let me bring my palette over here so you can see it. As a teacher, I kind of like this business of having you guys on camera, because I can show you things that you can't see in class. So I'm just mixing kind of a very cool gray right here. This is my ultramarine blue and my burnt sienna and water. So the water kind of against the white of the palette kind of lets me see that's a little too warm. So I'm going to add some more blue to it. The burnt sienna is a stronger color than the ultramarine blue. Now, while this is kind of dark right here, what I will do, and I'm just rinsing my brush out, is that I will just take a little bit off of a corner and mix it with the water that's on my brush, and so it becomes a lighter color. I don't want it real dark right now, but I do want to find places that I can put these colors in. And this is where clouds kind of throw me, is that they look like they should have light edges, but they end up with dark edges. So I've just got the color on the tip of my brush, and then a rinse, and then I come in and immediately just soften that color. I can pull it back with my brush so that just like the edge is there. Be a little looser and freer, leave some of the colors. The way I paint, I've got a lot of movement. Yeah, you can see it in there. You can see all of these little things. I don't want to lose all of those. Some of them I will enhance. Some of them I'll just leave, and it'll just look like texture in there. Now, like on this one, I'm going to go behind it. This is negative painting. This one was positive painting, where I painted the edge of that. Now this one, I'm going to create the edge for this one by negative painting the cloud behind it, so it looks like sunlight is there. And I'll lift a little bit more out. But do this as you go. Do a little bit like I've done here, then rinse your brush, and then come back, and I'm just kind of, with a damp brush, just kind of pulling that out, softening the edges. And working around my clouds that way, because like I said, clouds are kind of weird, the way the light will hit them, and what you think should be light has a dark edge to it, and other things just are bright white in the middle of all this dark. And clouds are fascinating. And don't make it a smooth line there. Make it kind of bumpy and soft. So I can even come in places and soften the edges on the inside so that it looks a little bit softer and rounder. Too wet. The bottoms of these clouds are pretty dark. At least parts of them are. So I can come in and just kind of do that. And then just kind of fade out parts. And that's just by adding a little more water and pulling the paint. Softening the edges. Now here's where you can kind of work around your painting, because I can work here and then I can move to someplace else and work on that, and then move back into an area after it's dry a little bit. Now this one, I'm going to positive paint this edge. Some of this I'm making up, some of it I'm following what I see in the photograph. I'm going to leave that little thing light, so I need to get some dark around it. And you don't want this real dark. It's far away. Let me bring my photo back up here and grab a. So if I have my photo here and I want to see how dark this is, I mean, it looks pretty dark compared to the sky and everything, but if I put it, get my my value scale, the darkest part is only in the middle of a value scale. So I can kind of come in and check what I'm doing. It's right around in this area. So you don't want to get these too dark. And I've probably already done that. Let me check. Actually, I need to check it when it's dry. No, that's pretty close. That's pretty close. Okay, so I'm just going to continue doing this. Let's see, what have I got going up on the top there? And some of it is very subtle color changes. So that means a lot more water in your brush. Some of it can be a little bit darker, but like I said, there's nothing here that's going to be like super dark. These are soft clouds. Put a little bit down, and then I come back in and I soften the edges. And I can also come in, like in some of these here, where I need them to be a little bit lighter. This is just a wet or damp brush, and I'm just lifting some more of that paint off, creating a lighter area. So the brush isn't real wet, and I'm just going over this and kind of stirring up the paint that's already on the paper. And I have my paper towel handy, and then I just lift it off. And so when it dries, there will be more of a contrast between the sky and the cloud. So this is, one of those things where you can work a little bit on one, and then you may want to come back in and work a little bit on the other, because it helps keep things even. Sometimes you're working on one color or one aspect of it and you're not quite sure what's going on, and you keep working on it and making it worse and worse when you really need to be working on the other aspect of it. Do little bits at a time. This is an erase. You have more control of it if you just come in and do a little bit here and a little bit there. There are some just little freaky dark clouds. I have no idea why they're so dark, but every place has them, and I don't know why they're that dark. Now, in the distance, some of these, the bottoms of these clouds are in the distance. Remember, they've got to be softer in color. So coming in with a softer gray means just adding some more water to it. And these will create the bottoms of those really distant clouds. Learning to observe is probably the hardest thing you learn when you're trying to get better at your art. But once you start seeing things, then it's just like, why haven't I seen that before? I'm going to add just a little touch of alizarin crimson to part of this. To kind of give the distant clouds a little more of a lavender look. And if you really start looking at some of these distant clouds, you'll see that there are all kinds of colors in there. And depending on what kind of clouds they are, there's some of them that have a lot of color in them. Kind of make your brush kind of dance around. Cat here. Okay, I'm going to stop.